The air in The Gilded Spoon was thick with the scent of expensive truffles and hushed conversations. Soft golden light spilled from ornate chandeliers, barely touching the polished mahogany, leaving most of the corners in shadow. A young woman, her movements precise and unhurried, despite the single prosthetic leg that supported her, navigated the tables. She wore a simple, elegant dress, and her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Finally, she reached a small, empty table tucked away near a velvet curtain. With a quiet sigh, she settled into the plush seat, adjusting her leg discreetly under the table. Just as she picked up the heavy, embossed menu, a shadow fell over her. She looked up. Standing there was Mr. Han, a man whose name was whispered with a mix of fear and respect in certain circles, known to those in the know as a key figure in the Korean Mafia. His suit was impossibly sharp, his face a mask of practiced indifference, but his eyes, dark and piercing, held a clear, dismissive glint. He looked down at her, a corner of his mouth twitching. "You really think you belong here, girl? Or rather, half a girl?" His voice was low, but it carried an edge, a thinly veiled contempt that cut through the restaurant's polite hum. It wasn't a question. It was an order, a challenge, a declaration of his dominance. The woman didn't flinch. She met his gaze directly, her expression unreadable. Around them, the murmur of conversation seemed to dim, though no one openly stared. Her hand, resting on the menu, did not tremble. "Can I share this table?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. Yet it somehow filled the small space between them. There was no anger, no fear, no pleading in her tone, only a calm, unsettling directness. It was not the response he expected, not the cowering or the indignant outburst. It was a neutral statement, a simple query that held an unexpected weight. It implied a hidden strength, a calculated move in a game he hadn't realized he was playing. Mr. Han's brow furrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a sneer. He let out a short, humorless chuckle. "Don't waste my time," he drawled, his eyes sweeping over her with renewed disdain. He turned, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist, clearly believing he had won, that his words had put her in her place. He had no idea. As he walked away, a waiter, who had been hovering nearby, discreetly bumped into him, spilling a tiny amount of red wine on the pristine white cuff of his expensive shirt. It was barely noticeable, a small, almost accidental smudge, but it was enough to make Mr. Han pause, a vein throbbing in his temple. He glared at the flustered waiter, then continued on, oblivious to the subtle shift in the restaurant's quiet rhythm. The woman watched him go, her expression still unreadable, but a faint, almost imperceptible gleam appeared in her eyes. It was not triumph, not anger, but something far more complex, a cold resolve. The wine stain was just the beginning, a tiny crack in the carefully constructed facade of his world. He had no idea what he had just set in motion. The tension in the air, though still subtle, had thickened, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Before that night, the woman, whose name was Hana, had lived a life deeply rooted in the bustling Korean-American community of Los Angeles. Her family ran a small, beloved bakery in Koreatown, the scent of sweet red bean paste and freshly baked bread a constant, comforting presence in her childhood. Her parents, immigrants who had built their lives from scratch, instilled in her the values of hard work, respect for elders, and a quiet resilience. The neighborhood was a vibrant tapestry of Korean traditions, woven into the fabric of American life, a place where the sounds of K-pop mixed with traditional folk music, and where kimchi was as common as hot dogs. Hana's days were a blend of helping at the bakery, attending community events, and pursuing her passion for art. She had always found solace in sketching, her nimble fingers bringing to life the faces and scenes around her. Art was her escape, a place where she felt whole, unburdened by the one thing that often made her feel different: her prosthetic leg. She had lost her leg in a car accident when she was just 10, a trauma that had reshaped her life but hadn't broken her spirit. The prosthetic was a constant reminder, sometimes a source of frustration, but mostly just a part of who she was. Society, however, wasn't always so accepting. The stares, the whispers, the subtle pity in people's eyes. These were the vulnerabilities she carried, even as she projected an image of strength. She dreamed of going to art school in New York, of having her own gallery, of creating something truly meaningful. These dreams often clashed with the traditional expectations of her family, who hoped she would marry a good Korean man, perhaps take over the bakery, and lead a more conventional life. Hana loved her family deeply, but a part of her yearned for something more, something that was entirely her own. Mr. Han, the man who had just insulted her in the restaurant, had been an almost invisible, yet ever-present, figure in her life for years. He wasn't a direct family member, but his influence permeated the community like a thick fog. He was a distant cousin of a prominent family friend, a man who had risen quickly through the ranks, his wealth and power growing with each passing year. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a gatekeeper, a shadow figure who held sway over many livelihoods and reputations. Even as a child, Hana had heard hushed conversations about him, about his connections, and the way people deferred to him. He would occasionally appear at community events, always impeccably dressed, always surrounded by an entourage. He'd offer a polite, almost condescending nod to her parents, a fleeting glance at Hana. His presence, even then, felt heavy, a quiet pressure that made people walk on eggshells. He represented a type of power that Hana instinctively distrusted, a power built on fear, not respect. His occasional, seemingly innocuous interactions with her family, a veiled suggestion about a business deal, a thinly disguised critique of her father's traditional methods, always left a bitter taste. His influence, even before their direct confrontation, cast a long shadow over her aspirations. There was an unspoken understanding in the community that crossing Mr. Han, or even displeasing him, could have serious consequences. Hana had seen it happen to others, small businesses suddenly struggling, families facing unexpected troubles. This pervasive influence had shaped much of her quiet resilience, teaching her to observe, to listen, and to choose her battles carefully. The emotional landscape of their conflict was deep, etched with years of subtle slights and the unspoken power dynamics of their community. Hana's past experiences, her struggles with her disability, and Mr. Han's pervasive, intimidating presence had all converged, building a hidden pressure that simmered beneath the surface. The restaurant confrontation was not just a random insult. It was the inevitable collision of these two worlds, a breaking point born from years of quiet endurance and the emotional weight of his unyielding authority. She had carried the burden of his implicit power for too long, and that night, something had finally shifted. The weight of Mr. Han's presence wasn't just a recent thing. It was a feeling that had settled over Hana's life like dust. Looking back, she could see a pattern, a series of small cuts that had slowly chipped away at her spirit. It wasn't one big fight, but 1,000 little moments where his shadow fell over her family. She remembered her father's small dry cleaning business, a place of hard work and honest sweat. When a new, flashier dry cleaner opened down the street, backed by one of Mr. Han's silent partners, her father's business suffered. Mr. Han had offered advice, a thinly veiled suggestion that her father should sell. It wasn't a threat, not directly, but the meaning was clear. Her father, a proud man, refused. Their income dropped, and the stress lines deepened on her mother's face. Then there was the time her older brother Jay wanted to open a small coffee shop. He had saved for years, full of hope. Mr. Han, through a distant relative, had promised to help Jay secure a good lease in a bustling part of town. Jay had put all his savings into the initial setup, trusting the promise. But at the last minute, the lease fell through, given instead to a cousin of Mr. Han. The excuse was vague, something about better terms. Jay lost a lot of money and a piece of his optimism. He never tried to open his own business again. These weren't grand betrayals, but a slow, steady drip of disappointments, each one adding to the quiet resentment that grew within Hana. She saw how Mr. Han could twist things, how he used his influence without ever directly getting his hands dirty. He was a master of subtle manipulation. He would offer favors that always came with unseen strings attached, strings that would inevitably pull tighter and tighter. He'd invest in community projects that enriched his friends, leaving others out. He'd make promises to families about jobs or opportunities, only to quietly let them fade away, leaving behind a trail of broken hopes. It was always done with a polite smile, a soft voice, making it impossible to point a finger directly. These moments created an undercurrent of injustice that ran through the community. People suffered, but they couldn't fight back. How do you argue against a misunderstanding or a change of plans when the person behind it holds so much power? Hana remembered a friend's family who lost their house after a bad business deal with someone connected to Mr. Han. They couldn't prove anything, but everyone knew. They just packed up and left town, their dignity bruised. The silence from the rest of the community wasn't indifference. It was fear. It was the cultural pressure to avoid confrontation, to keep the peace, especially with someone as powerful as Mr. Han. Hana had seen her own family swallow their pride, bite their tongues and carry on, because what else could they do? This slow buildup of resentment, this quiet suffering, had carved something deep inside Hana. The restaurant confrontation wasn't just about a table or an insult. It was the final straw. It was the culmination of years of watching her family and friends be pushed around, of seeing dreams crushed by unseen hands. It was the moment all those small, insidious acts finally boiled over. All the quiet endurance, all the swallowed anger. It all came to a head when Mr. Han looked at her with that familiar sneer. That night, something inside Hana, something that had been quiet for too long, finally snapped. It wasn't just about her. It was about every single slight, every broken promise, every injustice she and her community had silently endured. The atmosphere in the community grew heavier, almost suffocating. Mr. Han's actions, once subtle, became bolder, more direct. It felt like a tightening noose around Hana's life and the lives of those around her. The quiet conflicts that had simmered beneath the surface started to boil over, leading to open arguments and strained interactions within the close-knit community. People began to take sides, or at least to show their discomfort more openly. Hana found herself facing increasing pressure from all directions. Neighbors, who had once offered polite nods, now gave her wary glances. Relatives, usually supportive, started to hint that she should let things go or not stir up trouble. The unspoken expectation was clear: conform, avoid conflict, maintain the facade of harmony, even if that meant enduring injustice. It was a cultural dance of respect and hierarchy, where challenging someone like Mr. Han was seen as a grave offense, not just to him, but to the delicate balance of the community itself. Some whispered about her being too headstrong, too Americanized, forgetting her place. Others, a brave few, offered quiet words of encouragement, but always in hushed tones, afraid of being overheard. Mr. Han, sensing a shift, grew more arrogant, more openly threatening. His belief in his own untouchability became more pronounced. He didn't bother with veiled threats anymore. He started to make direct moves to undermine Hana's family. Her mother's small catering business, which had always relied on word of mouth within the community, suddenly found itself without bookings. Large family events that would normally call upon her mother's renowned kimchi and japchae went to other caterers, often less experienced ones, but ones known to be in Mr. Han's good graces. It wasn't hard to trace the whispers, the subtle suggestions that her mother was unreliable or too busy. Then came the incident with Hana's physical therapy clinic. She had worked hard to build her practice, specializing in prosthetic rehabilitation. It was her passion, her way of helping others navigate challenges similar to her own. One morning, she arrived to find her clinic door vandalized, not with graffiti, but with a series of obscure, superstitious symbols painted in red. It was a clear message designed to instill fear and doubt, to make people question her practice, her reputation. The police were called, but they found no leads. Everyone knew, though. Everyone understood it was a warning, a public shaming orchestrated by Mr. Han to send a chill through anyone who dared to stand with Hana. The emotional suffocation became almost unbearable. Hana felt trapped, caught between her desire for justice and the overwhelming weight of community pressure. Every day felt like walking through thick mud, every step a struggle. The constant whispers, the cold shoulders, the subtle sabotage of her family's livelihood. It all chipped away at her resilience. She tried to maintain a brave face, but inside, a profound weariness settled in. She saw the worry in her parents' eyes, the quiet desperation as they tried to make ends meet. Her brother Jay, usually so stoic, started withdrawing even more, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. There were moments she questioned everything. Was it worth it? Was her stand against Mr. Han causing more harm than good? She felt a deep sense of guilt, seeing her family suffer because of her defiance. The cultural expectation to avoid conflict, to preserve harmony, clawed at her. It was a powerful force, ingrained since childhood. She felt like she was fighting not just Mr. Han, but an entire way of life, a deep-seated tradition of deference and quiet endurance. This was her lowest point, a period where the pressure seemed insurmountable, and the path forward felt utterly obscured by the smog of fear and despair. She was drowning in the escalating conflict, feeling the full, relentless force of Mr. Han's power and the community's silent complicity. Then came the day everything changed, a brutal turning point that ripped through the suffocating quiet of their lives. It was a Tuesday, a seemingly ordinary afternoon when news spread like wildfire through the community center. Mr. Han, usually so careful about his public image, had been caught on video, not just yelling, but physically assaulting an elderly woman. The woman was Mrs. Kim, a respected elder who had dared to question his latest shady business deal involving a new community development. The video, grainy and shaky, had been secretly recorded by a young delivery driver who happened to be passing by. It showed Mr. Han, red-faced and furious, grabbing Mrs. Kim by the arm, pushing her against a wall, and shouting threats about her family. This wasn't just a rumor or a whispered insinuation. It was a concrete, undeniable act of violence, captured for all to see. The video, initially shared in hushed tones on private group chats, quickly went viral within their insular Korean-American community. It exposed the true depths of his cruelty, shattering the illusion of his respectable front. Before, people might have tolerated his shady dealings, his manipulative ways, or even his quiet intimidation. But laying hands on an elder, a woman, in such a public and aggressive manner, that crossed a line that even the most fearful or complicit members of the community couldn't ignore. The revelation hit Hana with a strange mix of horror and relief. It was devastating to see Mrs. Kim, a woman she respected deeply, treated with such disrespect. But it also broke the spell of fear that had held so many captive. This wasn't a subtle slight or a veiled threat. It was an open wound, impossible to ignore or explain away. The cycle of suffering, the quiet endurance, suddenly felt like it was cracking. People started talking openly, their voices no longer hushed. The fear was still there, but it was now laced with a potent anger, a collective outrage that had been simmering beneath the surface for too long. For Hana, this event was the catalyst she needed. It solidified her resolve, transforming her quiet defiance into an unshakable determination. The shame and guilt she had felt about her family's suffering began to recede, replaced by a clear, burning sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her anymore, or her family. It was about Mrs. Kim and every other person Mr. Han had intimidated and exploited. It was about reclaiming their community from his toxic influence. The narrative turned the key at that moment. The story was no longer about Hana enduring hardship. It was about her actively seeking justice. The video gave her a weapon, a piece of undeniable evidence that could not be twisted or dismissed. It exposed the vulnerability of a man who had always seemed untouchable. His power, built on fear and reputation, was now crumbling under the weight of his own monstrous actions. Hana realized that this was her chance, the opportunity to break free from the oppression and finally confront Mr. Han on terms that were no longer dictated by his power. She saw a path forward, a way to fight back that felt right and necessary, not just for herself, but for everyone he had wronged. The era of quiet suffering was over. The era of active resolution had begun. The video of Mr. Han assaulting Mrs. Kim hit Hana like a physical blow. A wave of nausea washed over her, seeing the elderly woman she so respected treated with such brutality. Fear mixed with a raw, burning anger she hadn't felt in years. Doubt gnawed at her. Could she really stand up to someone so vicious? Shame crept in too, a familiar feeling from all the times she hadn't acted, hadn't spoken up. But then, a strange surge of determination pushed through the fear. This was it. There was no going back. Her quiet defiance had to become something more. The community exploded. The video spread like wildfire, jumping from phone to phone, house to house. People who had always averted their eyes, whispered behind hands, or simply endured Mr. Han's tyranny, now spoke out. It was messy, chaotic, and loud. The initial reactions were a mix of shock and disbelief, followed by a furious outpouring of indignation. Mrs. Kim, frail but dignified, became a symbol. Her bruised arm, visible in the video, was a bruise on the entire community's soul. Unexpected allies emerged. Mr. Lee, the quiet owner of the corner grocery store, who had always seemed too timid to challenge anyone, was one of the first. He started a petition, gathering signatures for Mr. Han's removal from the community board. Young people, many of whom had grown up under Mr. Han's shadow, found their voices. They organized protests, small at first, outside his businesses, holding signs written in Korean and English, calling for justice. Hana found herself drawn into these groups, helping to translate, to organize, to strategize. Her years of feeling isolated and powerless began to fade as she connected with others who shared her outrage. But not everyone was on their side. There were those who stood by Mr. Han, either out of fear, loyalty, or because they benefited from his network. Mrs. Park, a gossipy neighbor who always seemed to know everyone's business, spread rumors that Mrs. Kim had provoked Mr. Han, that the video was edited. Some older members of the community, steeped in traditional respect for authority and hesitant to cause public scandal, urged caution. "Don't rock the boat," they would say. "It will only bring more trouble." They worried about the community's reputation, about shame being brought upon them by internal conflict. These cultural dynamics were a constant presence, shaping every reaction. The concept of saving face was deeply ingrained, and public disputes were often seen as shameful, regardless of who was in the right. For Hana, this period was profoundly unsettling, yet exhilarating. She had spent so long bottling up her feelings, living with a quiet resentment. Now, the dam had broken. The anger she felt for Mr. Han was intense, but it was also a powerful motivator. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach whenever she thought about direct confrontation. But it was overshadowed by a burning sense of purpose. Every time she saw Mrs. Kim's face in the video, every time she heard a story of Mr. Han's cruelty, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming their community, about showing that even the most powerful bully could be held accountable. The emotional and psychological toll was immense. Sleep was hard to come by, her mind racing with plans and worries. She felt the weight of expectation, not just from the new allies, but from herself. She couldn't fail. This chaos, this upheaval, was a crucible. It was forging her, transforming her, from the quiet, almost invisible woman she had been into someone strong, determined, and ready to fight. The immediate aftermath was messy, unpredictable, but in that mess, Hana was finding her true strength. The aftermath of Mr. Han's downfall was a slow, difficult process of reconstruction for everyone, especially for Hana. The community felt like a wounded animal, healing but scarred. She spent weeks helping Mrs. Kim settle into a new, safer apartment, away from the prying eyes and whispers that still lingered around her old neighborhood. It wasn't just about finding a new place. It was about creating a new sense of security and peace. Hana helped her apply for aid, navigate the complex legal system, and even just sat with her, listening to stories of a life that had been overshadowed by fear for too long. This act of care was healing for Hana too. It was a tangible way to mend some of the damage Mr. Han had inflicted, not just on Mrs. Kim, but on the entire fabric of their shared lives. Mr. Han's consequences were swift and brutal. The video, combined with the testimony of dozens of people who had been too afraid to speak before, painted a clear picture. He faced charges for assault, extortion, and various financial crimes that the investigation uncovered. His businesses, once pillars of his power, crumbled under the weight of boycotts and legal action. His reputation was in tatters, his social standing utterly destroyed. The community, once fearful of him, now openly shunned him. He lost everything that had defined him: his money, his status, his influence. It was a complete and utter collapse, a stark warning to anyone who believed themselves above the law or moral decency. Hana felt no joy in his ruin, only a quiet sense that balance had been restored. Justice had been served, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. The resolution, though satisfying, wasn't a fairy tale ending. The scars remained. Some friendships were broken beyond repair. Some families still struggled with the shame of having sided with Mr. Han. But there was also a new strength, a newfound unity. Mrs. Kim, once a symbol of vulnerability, became a quiet beacon of resilience. She started a small community garden, a place where people could gather, share stories, and grow things together. Hana volunteered there often, finding a therapeutic rhythm in the soil and the sunshine. She realized that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about building something new and better on the foundations of what was broken. Hana herself had changed profoundly. The fear that had once dictated so much of her life had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence. She started taking art classes, something she had always dreamed of but never pursued. Her prosthetic leg no longer felt like a burden or something to hide. It was simply a part of her, a testament to her unique journey. She found a new purpose in advocating for others, helping new immigrants navigate the complexities of their new country, ensuring they had a voice. She learned that true strength wasn't about physical power, but about courage, empathy, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. Her journey had been long and difficult, marked by moments of profound despair and unexpected triumph. From the quiet girl who felt invisible to the woman who helped bring down a powerful oppressor, Hana's transformation was complete. She understood now that resilience wasn't just about enduring, it was about evolving. It was about finding your voice, even when it trembled, and using it to create a better world, one step at a time. Her story, once a quiet whisper of pain, had become a loud testament to the power of justice, community, and the unwavering human spirit. She finally found a sense of peace, a quiet joy in the everyday, knowing that she had played her part in making things right. The restaurant encounter, which had started with a cruel remark, had truly been the beginning of her freedom.